welcome to my channel. Let's talk about some recently watched horror movies. I started off January with Bones and All, which is the horror movie about cannibalism from 2022. This one stars Timothée Chalamet and Taylor Russell. So the story centers on these characters who have this affliction, I guess, where they desire human flesh. They are cannibals and they're called eaters, and that's how they survive. And the story centers on this young girl named Marin who is abandoned by her father on her 18th birthday, and she basically sets out to discover who she is and find her mom. And she meets some interesting people along the way, including Timothée Chalamet's character, who becomes her love interest, and together they travel the world and they encounter some other people, like this really creepy dude who is obsessed with her, and it's really dark and disturbing at times. It's much more of a slow burn. It's a road story, a coming of age love story, but it's still horror. It still has some really horrifying moments and some gross moments involving the cannibalism stuff. I really enjoyed it. It also made me really sad. Taylor Russell is fantastic. It's hard for me to fathom that she is the same girl from Escape Room. Then I watched The Menu from 2022. It's currently streaming on HBO Max, or it was when I watched it, and I liked it. It's basically a social commentary type of horror movie about this group of people who travel to this exclusive restaurant to eat with this famous chef. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was entertaining. I was shocked when the first twist is revealed, and I was like, okay, so this is where we're going. It's funny, it has great performances, and I thought it was interesting. It made me want a cheeseburger so bad. Then I watched The Pale Blue Eye on Netflix. This is about an investigator who is investigating a series of murders on this military academy, and he teams up with one of the cadets, who is Edgar Allan Poe, to figure out what's going on, and there's some weird stuff involved. I thought it was interesting. I liked the atmosphere. I loved the performances. It was a unique mystery. I was just kind of bored at certain points, and it didn't suck me in completely. Then I watched Possession from 1981 for the first time ever. It's currently streaming on Shudder, and this movie is so stressful to watch. It's about this couple who has an extremely toxic relationship. They're basically at the end of their relationship, and the wife wants out, and the husband will not accept it. He's like, no, you're not leaving me. And he is determined to keep her and to follow her and figure out what she's doing on the side, and she's doing some weird shit. I don't even know how to describe it, but it went places I was not expecting, and there's like weird, gross stuff, and also really hard to watch violence happening between this couple who are going through this volatile time together. The scene in the subway, which I think a lot of us horror fans have heard of, that scene is no joke. Bella Anjani, she is fantastic in this, and when they get into that subway scene where she's just throwing herself around for it felt like 10 minutes. She's just screaming and just reacting. She's super emotional, and it's really hard to watch, but I couldn't look away. And she's going through a really horrific experience, and I don't know how she did that. She put her all into that. I don't know if I particularly liked this movie, but it definitely left an impression on me. It's just anxiety inducing, and it's weird. I don't even know what happened. Then I watched The Outwaters, which I made a review for, which I can link for you down below. This is a new found footage horror movie that's coming out February 9th in theaters from Screambox, and it will later be available to stream on Screambox. So this is about a group of filmmakers who head into the desert to film a music video, and they experience this really strange phenomenon, and everything goes horribly wrong. I liked this one. It's another one of those experimental films that's not really conventional, and it took some big risks. It takes about an hour where the horror starts, but it's not one of those jump scare horrors. It's not conventional horror, I would say. It's not in your face. It's kind of hard to see and indecipherable, and feels very much like a Blair Witch in that way, where you're just seeing these characters really react to the situation. The sound design is really good in this, and that's what elevated it for me because it's so creepy. I've seen it described as cosmic horror, which I'm not a huge cosmic horror person, but I get what they're saying. There's just a lot of stuff that's happening that doesn't make sense. It feels like a fever dream and a trip, a nightmare. It feels like nothing you've experienced before, and it feels like an experience. That's it. I felt uncomfortable, I felt disturbed, I felt confused. It's unsettling. So I think that if you are a patient person, if you are into found footage horror movies that are a little bit more abstract and not conventional, you'll enjoy this one. This is not a horror movie, but I have to say, I have to include it. I watched the Banshees of Inisherin. That movie is so fucking sad. Like, and just amazing performances. There is like a horror element to it though, because there's a banshee, kind of like metaphorical banshee, and just, oh my god, you guys need to watch it if you have not watched it. It's about this guy played by Colin Farrell. Brendan Gleeson basically decides he doesn't want to be friends with him anymore, and Colin Farrell's character is like, but why? Why don't you want to be friends with me? And he spends the whole movie trying to figure out why he doesn't want to be his friend, what's wrong with him. And Brendan Gleeson's character, he offers him an ultimatum that if he doesn't stop talking to him, he's gonna do something drastic. And it gets dark. So it has some like horror feels to it, but yeah, it's sad. Then I watched Mr. Creep, which is another found footage horror movie. This is from the same team who did Deadstream, which is one of my favorite horror movies from last year. This is about a group of college students who are filming their final project when they discover this online legend of this guy, this serial killer called Mr. Creep, who would basically hack into the TV broadcast signal and broadcast his exploits. And he had this creepy sidekick doll with him. So the students decide to investigate this instead, and it goes wrong. I love the setup. I love the concept of this serial killer using this like broadcast signal to communicate with people and the legend behind that. I think that's really cool. It had a really cool setup of them investigating. The characters kind of do some unbelievable things, like the situation becomes a little far-fetched and a little bit generic towards the end, but I still think it's a good, fun, silly time, and if you're a fan of found footage horror movies, you'll probably get a kick out of it, so I do recommend watching it. And that doll is so creepy. I love the doll. Then I watched Wreck for the first time. I had only ever seen the American remake, which I really liked. I didn't get why people shit on it, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna finally watch Wreck. And I really enjoyed it. I get why people love it so much and why they shit on the remake. Wreck is about this group production crew that are filming these firefighters, and then the firefighters get called to this apartment building because there's been an accident with this woman. So they get there and all hell breaks loose, and they basically get quarantined inside this building and they can't leave, and there's an infection going around where it's causing people to turn into like zombies. What I liked about Wreck is that you spend a lot of time with the characters, getting to know them, felt on another level. And the revelation of what happens, what's causing all this, is much different than how they explain the events in the American remake, which surprised me. I thought they were like the same. I think it's a fantastic zombie movie. Really creepy. There were still moments in this that creeped me out, even though I knew kind of what would happen because of the American remake, but it was different enough where I was like, oh my god, yeah, that's scary as shit. Then I watched Wreck 2 immediately after, and this one is a little different. It takes place immediately after the events of the first film. It's on the same night. It's following this SWAT team that goes into the building. They take this scientist into the building with them. They basically expand on the events of the first film and on the explanation for what's happening, which I thought was really interesting. And it becomes a lot more religious horror than I expected. I think it's a fun follow-up, but it has some characters I didn't particularly like following. It has some really creepy moments, but I would not put it at the same level as Wreck. Then I watched Wishcraft from 2003 or 2002, which is an early 2000s horror movie that I personally love. It's super cheesy and of its time. It's very dated. I don't really know why I love it so much. I think it's just one of those movies I watched when I was a teenager that has always stuck with me. It's about this nerdy boy who receives this mysterious talisman, and the talisman is a bull's dick. Like, that's it. And this talisman grants him 3 wishes, and of course, being a teenage boy, he wishes that the most popular girl in school will fall in love with him. So there's kind of issues with the whole wish of making this girl fall in love with him, like he's forcing her to do stuff against her will, but the protagonist is so likable that it's like kind of easy to watch. You're like, oh, but he's so sweet. I know, it's horrible. But the movie is so silly and funny and campy that I don't take any of it seriously. And the deaths are over the top and ridiculous, and the reason behind the murders that are happening is just so silly. It's just, I feel like a silly time capsule of early 2000s, and it's on Tubi, and I want you guys to watch it so we can talk about it and I can get your thoughts on it. Finally, I watched Skinamarink. It's currently streaming on Shudder, and again, this is another experimental film that is more like an art film, more like an experience than an actual movie with a full plot and storyline. I appreciate what this movie tried to do. I appreciate the technical side of things. I appreciate how it looks, the aesthetic. I think it's cool and unique. I love the concept of these two kids. They wake up in their house and they realize their parents are gone and all the doors and windows have disappeared. So they're basically locked inside and the only light they have is from the TV. That's terrifying. However, I wish that the film would have been a little shorter. It's a little too long for me. It's like an hour and a half, and it becomes very repetitive where you're just watching these kids lollygag around their house. There are some incredibly creepy moments in this movie that really disturbed me and unsettled me, but it's not enough to make me want to watch this movie again or love this movie. I don't outright hate it. Like, I know a lot of people either hate it or love it. I feel like I'm in the middle. I can appreciate it for what it is, but it didn't scare me the way it has seemingly scared and resonated a lot of people. I think there are many different interpretations of this film as to what this movie represents. It could represent childhood fears and traumas, and it could also be very supernatural. I looked at it more as like an art project than a movie. I'm very interested to see more from this director and this writer. I don't know. I know that some of the stuff really did upset me though and creeped me out and stuck with me. So it did scare me a bit. It just, is it the scariest movie ever? No, not for me. It's not for me. It didn't work for me. I love that people are enjoying it. I think it's really cool that a movie like this was released in theaters and got so much hype. Like, that's so cool. It just makes me excited for what's to come. Like, we're not getting the conventional cookie cutter horror movies. We're getting new stuff. Not everything's gonna work for everybody. Let me know what you thought of Skinamarink though. I'm really excited to see your thoughts. And that's everything I watched recently. Please let me know your thoughts below, what you watched recently, and I will catch you next time, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.